In this video, it's going to be up to you to use the object property shorthand and destructuring, which we covered in the last video, inside of the weather application. Now to start, I'm going to take our destructuring and object property shorthand playground file, and I'll move that off to the right-hand side so we have all of our weather app scripts side by side over here. And from the terminal, I am going to switch back into the weather app directory since we'll be running that application in this lesson. So cd:/weather-app. Now, once we're here, the goal is to figure out what exactly we're supposed to do, and as always with challenges, I have a set of challenge comments describing what I'd like you to get done. The big picture goal is to use both destructuring and the property shorthand syntax inside of the weather application. First up, you're going to use destructuring in app.js, forecast.js, and geocode.js. All three of these have an instance where we're using properties from an object that we could just destructure instead. Down below, we grab things off of data. Those properties could be destructured into individual variables. In forecast.js and in geocode.js, the only thing we ever use off of the response object is body. That could be destructured as well. From there, we can talk about using the property shorthand syntax. This can be used in forecast.js and in geocode.js. In both files, we set up the options object we pass to request, and we could use that syntax in there. So take some time to knock out all of those refactors in the files listed for each. Then when you're done, test your work. So make sure you can still run the application and get the expected weather output. All right, pause the video, knock that out, and when you're done, come back and click play. How'd that go? I'm going to kick things off with app.js. Now in here, we can use destructuring, but there is no use case for the object property shorthand syntax, and that's okay. Down below, geocode has its callback called with two arguments. The first is error, which is a string, and the second is data, and we know that data is an object. We use three properties from it: latitude, longitude, and location. We're going to go ahead and destructure those instead of accessing them off of data. Up above, we have data. I'm going to remove that, and we are going to destructure the second argument passed to the callback. Right here, we are going to grab three things from it. First up, we have latitude. Then we're going to have longitude. And finally, we're going to have location. Now at this point, our program is broken because we're still using that data variable, but it no longer exists. We're going to remove data and dot in all three locations. Now we're just referencing latitude, which is indeed defined. We're just referencing longitude from up above, and down below, referencing location. Now that we have this in place, we can actually test our work before moving on to the other files. It's always a good idea to test your work as you refactor, so instead of getting to the end and having a bunch of different files that could have caused the error, it's easier to isolate the problem if you run the program multiple times. So node app.js, if this works with a search term like Philadelphia, then we know our refactoring here is good. If it doesn't work, we know that it must just be the changes we made to this particular file, making it easier to figure out what went wrong. Now let's move on to the other files, forecast.js and geocode.js, both which can use destructuring and that shorthand syntax. Over in forecast.js, we can use the shorthand syntax in the object we pass to request. Instead of referencing a URL variable to get the URL property, we can use the shorthand syntax, which does the exact same thing. This is still setting up a URL property whose value comes from the variable up above because the names are identical. Now we can also use a little bit of destructuring. Down below, we have error and we have response. We know response is an object, but the only property we're ever using off of it is body, so we could just destructure that. I'll remove the response argument, set up my curly braces, and list out body right here. Down below, we can now remove any use cases of response, replacing them with just the call to body. So right here, instead of response.body.error, I have body.error, and I'll remove response dot down below. I have it 3 times as we generate the forecast, and I'll remove it in all 3. Now we are just referencing body, which does indeed exist as a standalone variable because we destructured it up above. Last up, we can move to geocode.js, which is very similar to the forecast file. I can use the shorthand syntax right here once again when setting up the URL, and once again I can destructure body off of response. Now there are 4 situations where we used response before. Once right here to fetch the length of the features array. That's going to be just body.features.length now, and down below we used it for each of these 3 property values. So I'm going to take all 3. I'm going to remove response dot accessing just the body object. Now that we have this in place, we've done all the refactoring. That is steps 1 and 2, and we're going to move on to step 3 and actually test things out for a final time. So down below from the terminal, let's go ahead and rerun the program. Right here, what do I get? I get my forecast still printing. It is for the correct location, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the United States, and I have my forecast. Rain in the morning. Yep, it is indeed raining outside. It's currently a bit chilly with a 0% chance of rain as we continue through the day. Now that we have this in place, we are all done, and that is an introduction to ES6 destructuring and the object property shorthand. We're going to use both of these extensively throughout the class now that we know about them. Sure, there are other situations where we could have used these in notes.js, but we'll just continue to use these features going forward instead. Speaking of going forward, let's go ahead and jump right in to the next video.